At Thanksgiving dinner, my stepmother told 18 relatives my dream of becoming a doctor was a fantasy draining the family. She mocked every late-night study session, every sacrifice. I sat there, silent, taking the humiliation. What she didn't know was that the dean of the medical school was about to walk through the door, personally delivering a full-ride scholarship and a secret about my late mother that would shatter her forever. My name is Sophia. I'm 24. For 8 years, my stepmother made sure I knew I'd never be a doctor. It was a fantasy, she said, one that was draining my father's wallet. But what she never counted on was a secret my late mother left behind, a secret that was about to walk through the front door. To understand what happened when that doorbell rang, you have to go back 8 years. I was 16 when my mother died, pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. My father didn't know how to be alone, so he married Barbara 11 months later. She moved into our house with her designer luggage and her opinions about everything I was doing wrong. My college plans were impractical. My study habits were obsessive. The framed photo of my mother on the mantel was depressing everyone. She took it down one afternoon while I was at school. When I asked where it went, she said it was in a box in the attic where it belonged. My father said nothing. He never said anything. I poured my grief into school. Straight A's, AP Biology, AP Chemistry, AP everything. I volunteered at the hospital every Saturday. I knew by 17 that I wanted to be a doctor, an oncologist specifically. I wanted to understand the disease that took my mother, and I wanted to face it with more than helplessness. My father was proud in his quiet way. Barbara called it my little obsession. She'd say it at dinner with a smile that never reached her eyes. The medical school application process is brutal, she'd announced to whoever was listening. Very expensive and very competitive. We have to be realistic. By the time I graduated college with a biochemistry degree and a 3.9 GPA, I'd applied to 14 medical schools. I funded the applications myself, tutoring, waitressing, a research stipend. Barbara called it wasteful. When the rejection letters started coming, she called it inevitable. I got 11 rejections, 2 waitlists. One interview, Cranston Medical School, 2 hours from home. Not my first choice, but a strong program with a respected oncology fellowship. The interview was scheduled for September 28th. I didn't tell Barbara about it. The interview day arrived. I wore my mother's pendant, a small silver caduceus she'd bought me when I first said I wanted to be a doctor. I was 13. She'd worn a matching one during her own medical training before she left residency to raise me. The interview panel was 3 faculty members. One of them was Dean Anthony, the head of admissions. He asked why I wanted to pursue medicine. I told him about my mother, about sitting in infusion rooms watching doctors try to save her, about the moment I realized knowledge could mean time, and time meant everything. He was silent for a moment, then asked if my mother had trained at Cranston. I said no, she attended Emory. He nodded and moved on, but something flickered in his expression. I left the interview feeling like I'd done well, but I'd felt that after other interviews too. The waitlist had taught me that good wasn't necessarily good enough. Weeks passed. No word. Barbara's Thanksgiving dinner was approaching, and she'd invited 18 relatives. She wanted an audience, she always did. I told my father I wasn't coming. He asked me to reconsider, not because he'd defend me, but because my absence would make things harder for him. I said yes the way I always said yes. The night before Thanksgiving, I packed an overnight bag and stared at my phone, refreshing the Cranston admissions portal. Nothing. I told myself I'd survive one dinner. I was wrong. Thanksgiving at my father's house. 18 relatives crammed around a dining table that Barbara had decorated with ceramic pumpkins and gold-rimmed plates. She'd seated me at the far end, farthest from my father, nearest to her sister Carol, who never liked me. Barbara stood at the head of the table like a general addressing troops, wine glass raised. "Family is everything," she announced. "And part of loving family is being honest with each other, so I want to be honest tonight." She looked directly at me. I knew what was coming. "Sophia has been applying to medical schools," she said, voice dripping with concern that wasn't real. "Very expensive medical schools. Application fees, travel costs, prep courses, thousands of dollars. And for what? She's gotten rejection after rejection. One interview, she turned to my father. "George, I'm worried about our retirement. I'm worried about the strain this fantasy is putting on you." My father looked at his plate. He didn't correct her. He didn't say that I'd paid for everything myself. He just nodded slightly, the way he always did. Carol jumped in. "Medical school is nearly impossible these days. My neighbor's son had a perfect GPA and didn't get in anywhere. Maybe Sophia should consider nursing, something practical." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the table. I gripped my fork and said nothing. My mother's pendant was hidden under my blouse, cold against my skin. I'd worn it as armor. Barbara kept going. The truth is, Sophia has been living in a dream world since her mother died. She thinks becoming a doctor will somehow bring her back. It's not healthy, it's not realistic, and frankly, it's selfish. She let that word hang in the air. Selfish. Teen people stared at me. I was 24 years old and I felt like I was 12 again, watching her take down my mother's photograph. My cousin Mark, the only one who'd ever been kind, tried to speak up. Aunt Barbara, I think Sophia, Barbara cut him off. Mark, you don't know the full picture. You don't see the bills piling up, the credit card statements. I've had to make sacrifices for this family that no one appreciates. I knew about her sacrifices. The new Lexus in the driveway. The 2-week trip to Tuscany last summer. The kitchen renovation that cost more than my entire college tuition. But I didn't say any of that. I'd learned years ago that defending myself only gave her more ammunition. Barbara wasn't finished. She walked around the table, stood behind my chair, placed her hands on my shoulders like a puppeteer controlling a marionette. Tell everyone the truth, Sophia. Tell them how many schools actually wanted you. Tell them what the email said. She was talking about the waitlist notification from my top choice, the one that said, "We regret to inform you." She'd seen it on my phone screen 3 weeks ago when she grabbed it off the counter, scrolling through my notifications while I stood frozen. I didn't answer. "See," Barbara said to the room. "She can't even admit it, that's the problem. Delusion runs deep." My father finally spoke. "Barbara, maybe this isn't the time," she whirled on him. "When is the time, George, when we're bankrupt? When she's 30 and still chasing a pipe dream, someone has to be the adult here." She turned back to me, her voice softening into something almost maternal, which was worse because it was fake. "I'm saying this because I love you, Sophia. Someone needs to protect you from yourself." I felt my throat tight. I wanted to scream that she'd never loved me, that she'd spent 8 years erasing my mother, that the only thing she was protecting was her own control over my father's money. But I just sat there. Silent, because if I opened my mouth I'd cry, and I refused to give her my tears. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Barbara didn't. "Get that, sweetheart, maybe it's another rejection." A few people chuckled nervously. The phone buzzed again, and again. 3 missed calls in under a minute, all from a number I didn't recognize. I started to say it was nothing, that it could wait, but Barbara had already snatched her moment. Or maybe it's the one school that interviewed her, calling to say it was all a misunderstanding, that she's actually been accepted with a full ride and a parade. She laughed, and a few others joined in, and the sound of it, the laughter, dug into me like a splinter. And then the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Barbara's laugh cut off mid-breath. She looked toward the front door with the irritated confusion of someone whose carefully orchestrated performance had been interrupted. "On Earth would show up uninvited on Thanksgiving," she said, already walking toward the hall. My father stood, too, and followed her. Through the dining room archway, I watched Barbara open the front door. A man stood there in a wool coat, holding a leather briefcase and an envelope. He was in his early 60s, silver hair, kind eyes, authoritative presence. I knew that face. Everyone at the table heard him when he spoke. "Good evening. I'm Dr. Anthony, Dean of Admissions at Cranston Medical School. Looking for Sophia. Is she here?" Barbara's hand went to her chest. The room behind her went dead silent. Every single relative turned to look at me, and I realized with a jolt that made my hands shake that I'd forgotten to breathe. Barbara stood frozen in the doorway, her hands still gripping the edge like she could physically block him from entering. My father stepped forward, polite confusion on his face. "I'm sorry, Dr. Anthony, we're in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. Is something wrong?" The dean smiled, a warm and genuine smile that looked entirely out of place in that tense hallway. "No, nothing wrong at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I have news for Sophia that I wanted to deliver personally. May I come in?" He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped past Barbara, his coat still dusted with a light rain I hadn't noticed had started, and scanned the room until his eyes found mine. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. 18 faces snapped toward me. Barbara's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Dr. Anthony walked toward me, extending his hand. "Sophia, I'm sorry to interrupt your holiday. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I was in the area visiting my own family and realized I couldn't wait until Monday to tell you this." He handed me the envelope. It was thick, embossed with the Cranston seal. "I've had the privilege of interviewing thousands of applicants over 23 years. Your interview was among the most memorable. Not because of your grades, though they are exceptional, not because of your test scores, because of your answer to one question." He paused, and the entire room, every single relative, was staring at us like we were a movie they couldn't pause. I asked you why you wanted to be a doctor, Dr. Anthony continued. And you told me about your mother. About sitting beside her during chemotherapy, watching the oncology team fight for her, and realizing that knowledge meant time, that every moment we gave her was a gift. You said you wanted to give that gift to others. He looked me directly in the eyes. It takes a remarkable person to turn grief into purpose. The admissions committee voted unanimously. You've been accepted to Cranston Medical School, Sophia. But that's not all. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a second document. You've also been awarded the Dr. Elena Vasquez Memorial Scholarship. Full tuition plus a research fellowship in oncology. It's the highest honor we offer. For a second the world stopped. Full tuition. My mother's name, my mother's name. Dr. Anthony was still talking, but the words were muffled like I was underwater. I heard endowment established in 2004 and anonymous donor and cancer research fellowship. I felt my knees buckle slightly and grabbed the table for support. My father had gone pale, not from pride, not from joy, but from the shock of hearing his late wife's name spoken in this house, 8 years after Barbara had tried to erase it from every surface. Barbara found her voice. It came out thin and sharp. Elena Vasquez, that's impossible, that's Sophia's mother, she wasn't a doctor. Dr. Anthony turned to her, his expression shifting to one of careful neutrality. Actually, she was. Or rather, she was in medical school. She left her residency to raise her daughter, but she never stopped believing in medical education. She established this endowment anonymously years ago with the very specific request that the first recipient be someone who reminded the committee of her. He smiled at me again. When you described her pendant during your interview, I knew. The caduceus. She wore the same one in her residency photo. I tracked down the donor records and confirmed it. This scholarship was meant for you, Sophia, even before you walked into that interview room. My father made a sound I'd never heard before. Not a word, just a broken exhale like a dam cracking after decades of pressure. He stared at the floor. Aunt Carol's fork clattered onto her plate. The relatives were frozen, caught between the awkwardness of Barbara's earlier speech and the impossibility of what was happening. My cousin Mark, the one who tried to defend me, was grinning. A few others looked horrified, but not at me, at Barbara, whose face had drained to ash. She tried one last defense. Well, this is lovely, but we have dinner to attend to. Perhaps we can continue this conversation another time. Dr. Anthony looked at her, then at the silent table, at the half-eaten turkeys and the ceramic pumpkins and the relatives who wouldn't meet her eyes. He'd walked into something, and he knew it. He turned back to me. Sophia, I hope I haven't caused any disruption. I just wanted you to know that your mother's legacy is alive. She wanted this for you, she planned it, and you've earned it. He handed me a business card. Orientation is in August. Call me if you have any questions. I'll see myself out. He left, the front door clicking shut behind him, and the silence that filled the room was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. My father sank into his chair and buried his face in his hands. Barbara stood motionless, still holding the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. And I looked down at the scholarship letter, at my mother's name printed at the top in elegant script, and I finally let myself cry. Not from sadness, not from humiliation, but from the overwhelming realization that everything Barbara had tried to destroy had come back. Not just my dream, but my mother herself, reaching across 8 years of silence to save me. And she'd done it from the grave, with a secret she'd planted years ago, waiting for exactly this moment. For a long moment, no one moved. The front door had clicked shut, but Dr. Anthony's words still echoed through the dining room like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. My mother's name, her scholarship, her plan. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, the embossed letterhead, the words full tuition, and Elena Vasquez Memorial blurring behind tears I wasn't trying to stop anymore. My father hadn't looked up from his hands. Aunt Carol was staring at her wine glass like it contained answers. Uncle Robert, who'd laughed at Barbara's jokes 10 minutes earlier, was now studying the ceiling with the intensity of a man who wanted to be anywhere else. Then my cousin Mark stood up. He walked past the frozen relatives, past Barbara still gripping the doorframe, and wrapped his arms around me. Your mom did that, he said quietly, just for me. She knew you'd get here. That broke something open. A few other relatives started murmuring, not to Barbara but to each other. Did she say Elena Vasquez? Her mother was a doctor. I thought Barbara said she was a housewife. The story Barbara had spent 8 years telling was crumbling in real time, and everyone at that table knew it. My father finally lifted his head. His face was wet, his eyes red, and for the first time since my mother died, he looked at me directly, not through Barbara's filter, not with that hollow avoidance he'd worn for years. He looked at me like he was seeing me again. "Sophia," he said, and his voice cracked. "I didn't know, she never told me about the endowment, I didn't know she'd done this." He stood up unsteady and walked toward me. Barbara turned sharply. "George, sit down, this is a private matter, we'll discuss it later." This time he didn't obey. "No, Barbara." His voice was quiet but firm. "We won't." He reached me and put his hand on my shoulder. "Your mother saved every birthday card you ever gave her. She wrote you letters, years of them, for every milestone she knew she'd miss. I have them in a box. I was supposed to give them to you when you turned 18. I didn't. Barbara said it would upset you, that you needed to move on. I listened to her. I should have given them to you anyway." The words hung in the air. Letters, years of letters. A mother's voice I'd been denied because Barbara decided my healing would be inconvenient. Barbara stepped forward, her composure cracking for the first time. "I was protecting her. I gave up years of my life managing this household, managing your grief, and this is the thanks I get." She gestured wildly at the table, the relatives, the wreckage of her perfect Thanksgiving. "Everything I did was for this family." I finally spoke. "No, Barbara. Everything you did was for you. You took down her photo, you threw away her recipes, you told me my dream was a fantasy, you tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I'm related to, you didn't protect anyone, you tried to erase my mother and you failed." She stared at me, mouth open, and for the first time in 8 years she had nothing to say. No cutting remark, no sugar-coated insult, no weaponized concern, just silence. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "I think we should go." Chairs scraped against the floor. Coats were gathered. Hugs were offered to me, not to her. My cousin Mark squeezed my hand before he left. Aunt Carol, Barbara's own sister, didn't meet her eyes as she walked out. Within 10 minutes the house was empty. 18 relatives gone. The ceramic pumpkins sat abandoned. The pot roast had gone cold. Barbara retreated to the kitchen without another word. I heard the clink of a wine bottle and glass. My father and I were alone in the dining room. He pulled a key from his pocket, worn and old, and handed it to me. "Attic, there's a trunk with your mother's name on it. The letters are inside. I should have given you this years ago." I took the key and I could feel its weight, all the lost time it represented. He said, "I'm sorry for all of it." I didn't say it's okay. It wasn't, but I said, "Thank you." And that was a start. Later that night, after I'd driven home, I sat on my bed with the trunk my father had brought down from the attic. Inside were the letters. Dozens of them, sealed in yellowing envelopes, each labeled with an occasion. "For your high school graduation. For your white coat ceremony. For the day you become a doctor." My mother had written the last one when I was only 13, when her diagnosis was already terminal and she'd known she wouldn't be there. I opened the first envelope, the one labeled "For when you lose me," and I read her handwriting for the first time in 8 years. "My darling Sophia, if you're reading this, it means I kept my promise. I promised I would find a way to support your dream, even if I couldn't be there to watch it come true. This scholarship is my love, made tangible. You are enough, you always were. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She'd known. Before she died, she'd known Barbara might try to erase her, so she'd planted something that couldn't be erased. A gift that would arrive exactly when I needed it, delivered by a stranger on a night when everything seemed lost. My mother had outmaneuvered Barbara from the grave, not with anger, but with patience. She'd waited 8 years for a dean to walk through a door and speak her name over a Thanksgiving dinner that was supposed to be my humiliation. And in doing so, she'd given me more than a scholarship. She'd given me back my story. I think about that night often now. Not the humiliation, not the laughter, but the look on Dr. Anthony's face when he said my mother's name to a room full of people who had never spoken it. She'd been gone 8 years, but she was still the most powerful person in that house. Some people leave instructions in a will. My mother left a scholarship, an investment in a future she knew I'd fight for, planted like a seed that couldn't be dug up no matter how hard Barbara tried. That's the thing about love that refuses to die. It waits. It waits through silence, through erasure, through every attempt to rewrite the past. And when the moment comes, it walks right through the front door. My father and I are rebuilding something now slowly. He gave me the letters. He's reading them too, for the first time, discovering the wife he let someone else bury. Barbara moved out 6 months after that Thanksgiving. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she couldn't stand being in a house where my mother's name was spoken freely again. Some people can't survive the truth they tried to bury. The scholarship has my mother's name on it, and every time I walk into a lecture hall, I carry her with me. Not as a ghost, as a co-conspirator. So here's what I want you to sit with. Who planted seeds for you that you haven't seen bloom yet. What love is still waiting in the attic, in a letter, in a stranger's memory? Sometimes the people who can't be with us still find a way to show up. If this story hit something in you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I'd love to know what you're holding onto, what name you're carrying that no one around you says. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm Sophia. This was the night my stepmother tried to bury my dream, and the night my mother dug it back up.